Yo, so welcome to the podcast again, Spaceless Realms. And my brother, I wanted to begin this by asking you, how do different spiritual traditions interpret the concept of the soul's journey after physical death? Let's talk about that.
Just a very, very charged question. So
Mm.
much to answer to that. I just want to say right off the bat, before anybody tries to criticize any of this, that I am a generalist. So I know very little. I have a lot of surface knowledge about different traditions. I'm a world wisdom literature postdoctoral scholar at one of the considered to be one of the Ivy League institutions of Canadian universities at the University of Amiskwasiwaskihaka or University of Alberta in colonial terms. That being said, I seem like I know a lot, but I have a lot of surface knowledge. So I just want to say, please dig deep, drink deep from the Pierian spring, for its shallow draughts intoxicate the brain. So what that means essentially is go dig for yourselves, go research for yourselves, but also be very skeptical and question everything. Buddha himself said, question everything, including what I said, but nobody seems to want to do that. So one of the books that actually inspired me to answer this question in that way, which I would want to say just for the reference for anyone on the podcast who's listening, we didn't prepare this. We prepared this from about 2 minutes ago. So, Logan told me this about 2 minutes ago, and I started thinking, like, yo, this is an amazing question. But I'm not sitting there researching the question, thinking this is not a prepared podcast. Every podcast is freestyle. It's literally like off the top, off the dome. And to me, that's the realest way to do it because it
Mm.
triggers certain parts of the brain that are inactive if you don't spur them on the spur of the moment.
Definitely. Yeah.
That being said, I have a chapter in my book that's unfinished. The Anarchist Primer to the End of the World as We Know It, or the Psychosocial Manipulation of Consciousness, which deals with death and reincarnation. Now, that's based on a chapter from a book called Thanatos Nautes, or The Travelers of Death by Bernard Werber. Now, this is what I'm basing this on, but I'm going to try to go deeper, a lot deeper than that book goes, because that one mainly deals with the main Judeo-Christian traditions, namely the seven heavens and the seven different levels of heaven. So I can't even map those out appropriately according to the book. I would say go read the book if you want to. It's an amazing series. So you've got Thanatos Nautes, the Travelers of Death, Thanatonot in French. And then the series is called The Empire of Angels, L'Empire des Anges. Then after that, it goes into, I forget, it's called We the Gods, I think. It's a series called We the Gods, and it's a trilogy. So it explains a lot of what happens after death. I'd like to go into that, but I'd like to go different because in the book, it focuses on Greek mythology, which I disagree with because, again, it's a Judeo-Christian tradition as much as we like to say it isn't because Greeks weren't Jewish or Christian. But the influence of this society is very pervasive and it's still there in our political institutions, in our religions, in the way we build our architecture. So
Mm.
I'd like to go a different route, but I'd like to explain still that essentially, if you want to put it in a layman's term, we happen to travel the way it explains it in this book, which I like to agree with, is that we go through seven different levels of reality. But the eighth one, to me, which is very important, is neglected in the book, is the shamanic one. So the levels of heaven go from the first one, which I've written a track about a long time ago on an album called Revolution's Dream. And it has to do with facing your demons. So the first level of heaven has to do with facing, my apologies, facing all that you've done wrong in your life and facing all the so-called demons you would have in your life. So you have to battle all that you've done wrong. And you have to explain to all of them why you did that. And you have to succeed in doing that in order to get to the second realm. Now, the second realm has to do with, and this is like in the book, it's described as traveling through different parts. It's like astral traveling, essentially. And you could go into those in dream realms, but you usually go there after death. The way that Nas even says, and I don't want to quote Nas usually, but Nas says, I never sleep because sleep is the cousin of death. Now, obviously, everyone sleeps, but sleep is the cousin of death, and a good reason, because death is the evolution of sleep. It's like an after program. Now, something I'd like to quote, which isn't part of that book, has to do with another book, which is called Chaos in Cyberculture by Timothy Leary. Timothy Leary is considered to be the godfather of LSD, or of acid. Very much similar to, very similarly to Dr. Abraham Hoffer and Dr. Linus Pauling were double Nobel Prize 33 PhD laureates. They've done a lot of research with LSD and with mushrooms as psychedelic experiments to test mental health and to actually benefit mental health. Timothy Leary did that in the US. Dr. Pauling did that in the US as well, too, in California. But Dr. Abraham Hoffer did that in Saskatchewan in the 1950s and 60s, which is extremely, they called them, there was a movie made on it called Psychedelic Pioneers. I don't know where that's available, but if you find it, watch that. So essentially, psychoactives, as we previously discussed, they actually activate a certain part of our brain, which puts us into overdrive, puts us into higher density levels than we're usually used to as normal human beings, which is kind of akin to death in that sense. It's like going into an afterlife program. So the afterlife is like a brain program, which your brain through the pineal gland, when the soul travels from from the solar plexus, from Manipura chakra to the Ajna chakra, when it travels there, then your soul triggers an afterlife program into your brain, which melds with your consciousness and allows you to access higher realms. Now, this depends entirely, and most traditions agree on this. We are the ones judging ourselves, but according to our higher selves. So, in this higher self program, what happens according to those traditions, or according to many of the different traditions, whether it's Judeo-Christian or beyond that, and even the Eastern philosophies are much more specific and succinct. The indigenous traditions are much more holistic. The South American traditions, African traditions, much more holistic. They're much more encompassing. And what they describe usually in layman's terms, again, this is a generalist, it's a generalist idea of what those traditions express. So please don't take me as a specialist, but I am in that sense. I'm not from those cultures, and I am diasporically, but I'm not speaking as a shaman. I'm not speaking as a traveler of death, but I am, because I've been there. I've been through near-death experiences. I've been in those realms, but I don't want to pretend to be an expert. So according to those traditions, your soul travels all the way to the center of the galaxy, through those seven heavens and beyond them, until you get to the singularity point of the black hole, at which point, after your judgment, for all of your karmic points, if you want to put it that way, for all that you've done good, all that you've done bad is calculated in karmic points. And once you balance those, you know what your reincarnation is. Now, in astrophysical terms, once you get to the singularity point of the black hole, the hypothetical equation there is that there's a quasar after that, which restructures your energy into a completely different galaxy and dimension. And once you get there, that's where you get to where your fate or your destiny is, depending on the situation. Now, the second heaven, if we backtrack a bit, the first heaven is about battling your demons. Once you've battled your demons successively and explained to all of them why what you did wasn't necessarily evil or wasn't bad, but was necessarily maybe potentially a mistake or an error, or was simply justified in that sense for karmic reasons, then you get to the second heaven, which is the tantric heaven, which is fulfilling your fantasies. Now, this can happen in real life. It can happen in your waking life, or it can happen in your dreams, or it can happen in your afterlife as well. Those are three different levels, much like the physical and the mental and the spiritual represent three different realms. So once you get there, whether it's in this life or not, once you've battled your demons in this life, that's usually when you can access true love. Now, true love could be your desires, your passions. In the book, in Thanatos Nautes, in the book by Bernard Werber, it expresses that you need to give in to your fantasies, but in a healthy way. So you can't give in. If you give in to them in an unhealthy way, you get bogged down, you get pulled down by your demons, and you get judged, and then you fall into hell realms, which would be the nine hells of the Tibetan bardos that they explain in the Bardo Todor, which is the Tibetan Book of the Dead, or in the Egyptian Book of the Dead. You get judged for doing something inappropriate.
Mm.
If you get past that, I forget the way it's structured, but there's a realm about patience where you have to wait to get judged. There's another realm about beauty, which is the different heavens that are expressed. There's another realm about timelessness. There's another realm, which is, I forget the other ones, but essentially the last heaven is where you get judged by archangels and by different divinities, which represent all the different traditions. And then you get your ultimate karmic compendium of what you're sitting at in terms of points, in terms of what you deserve for a reincarnation. From that point on, you decide what your next life is going to be based on what you have available for karmic points. It would be like choosing from a video game where you have a certain number of saved points and you can choose to go wherever you want to with certain advantages. If you go back in time and you go to a previously saved checkpoint, which you've already bypassed, you can go back in the past with certain advantages and you can complete those missions more effectively. But if you choose to go to the ultimate level, which would be where you're sitting at presently, then supposedly in that book, it expresses that if you have 500 karmic points or more, you can reincarnate as a bodhisattva. Now, as a bodhisattva, as an enlightened, a minorly enlightened being, you can choose to become either a reincarnated human form of a teacher who expresses to people how to transcend this realm, or you can choose not to come back down to earth and you can choose to stay up there in those realms and be a bodhisattvic being in different higher realms. But each of them have their advantages and their inconveniences, because obviously in higher realms people know more, so you're not going to be as unique, you won't be as special, because if you reincarnate as a bodhisattva in a realm full of enlightened beings, people will say, listen, we know this already. Whereas a lot of people seem attracted to come back down to earth because they figure, if I know more than most earthlings, then I have an advantage and I'm advanced. So therefore, it's going to be beneficial for me because I can be a good teacher for people that are at a lower level. It's like going into a video game like World of Warcraft or something like that and saying, I'd rather go back to level 13 with higher magic instead of going to level 38, but then having to battle more difficult monsters and having to do tougher missions. That's one of the ways you could express that. But it's even a lot more complex than I'm trying to explain. I'm trying to break it down in terms that are comprehensible for most people.
Would you say that one thinking that they're different and unique is part of a code as well?
Yes, definitely. Um, I think that the idea of difference and uniqueness is much much akin to the idea of the fool knowing that they're a fool, but then becoming wise through the knowledge of being foolish,
Mhm.
or the wise man only being wise through knowing he's a fool, which is a similar inverted concept. So people who think they're different and unique, unless they have a very valid individual reason to believe that, which is possible, they're trapped in this conundrum. It's like someone saying, I'm good, I'm good, you know I'm good. But
Mm.
or someone saying, I'm generous, I know I'm generous, but you're negating yourself by saying that.
Mm. Yeah, brother, feel free to like say like if you want to take a break or if you want to like get some water or anything like that. You can always take the time to do that.
No, I'm good. I just needed to spark something.
Hi, brother.
So, and just for the record, so we mentioned that, so we're clear about it. I'm smoking mostly tobacco. There's a little bit of ganja in there. This is a prescription that I have. We're living in Canada. Canada is legal for me to smoke this, so I'm not doing anything illegal. But regardless, I would say please try, if you can, to abide by laws if they're not oppressive. That being said, psychoactives can be very beneficial for people's bodies. I'm not going to start saying one thing or another. I don't want to get banned or, removed from public, um, accessibility just because I'm doing something which seems to be illegal. This is mostly, it's about 90% tobacco, maybe 10% ganja, which is a mixture of hashish and marijuana, which I made myself, which also has honey and chocolate and coffee in it. And I made this myself as a medicine, which is prescribed to me. So it's prescribed through a psychiatrist and through Apollo clinics.
Wow. Hmm. Okay, so where were we? I think we were at the third heaven.
Yes. So I forget that, you'd have to read the book to remember the order of the heavens. I think the third one might be ultimate beauty. So it's like this imagine watching the most beautiful landscapes you've ever seen in your life in terms of nature. Something that some people like to refer to as nature porn. I hate that word. But like, let's say you watch like beautiful field of like the most amazing rainbow flowers you've ever seen in your life. So that one of the heavens has to do with ultimate beauty.
Hmm.
But once you get past that, there's a test of time, which you have to go through. And in that heaven level, I forget if it's the fourth or the fifth or the third. I forget. I think it's the fourth. I'm not sure. But you have to wait to be judged. But some people in the book that's described, which is a fictional book, the Thanatos Nautis book by Bernard Verber, it actually explains that some of the beings have been waiting there for centuries to get judged because there's such a long lineup, and it's the test of time. Now, many of those people are talking between each other.
Yeah, stemming from that, like if you think about how many people are here, like they say that there's like 8 billion people who exist on Earth, but imagine how many people have passed on from this realm and are in the astral planes. So I'm sure that
Exactly.
it's much more busy up there in a way.
Oh, it's millions every day just on planet Earth. Now imagine the whole cosmos, because it's an infinite cosmos,
Yeah.
right? There's a solar system. Now we don't even know if there's other life on other. We think there's no life on other planets. That's because we only base ourselves on carbon-based life forms.
Hmm. I'm sure there's
So
also, yeah, go on, go on.
no, I was just gonna say etheric beings obviously are not visible to the naked eye unless you're tuned to that frequency. So I guarantee you there's beings on Mars, on Venus, on Neptune, on Saturn, on Pluto,
Hmm.
on Mercury, on, so it's just a matter of seeing the spirits.
This reality is very serpentine like in nature, like it's very like serpent like. And that comes
Very
from
much.
like sort of like how these serpent-like beings, they control the earth in many different ways. And I want you to go deeper on that.
Well, this is very interesting because I have a track called that. It's called The Guardians, with Autonomous from Atlantis Army.
Hmm.
Now, that one describes how um, Shenlong, for example, in China, is a dragon-like being that, controls or protects the universe. There's Ananta, which is the cosmic serpent in India, which also protects the universe and is wrapped around Kali, is wrapped around Annapurna, is wrapped around many divinities. The cosmic serpents behind Vishnu, behind Shiva, the king cobras. They protect. Their hoods protect them from rain and from elements.
Hmm.
Now, serpent in Hebrew tradition, for example, in Hebraic tradition, Nehesh is the name for serpent, which means also wisdom. So the wisdom, which is Hasidic, which is acidic, is the acid from the venom. It is deadly, but if you train with it, you can become immune to that poison and you can benefit from that in supernatural ways. Now, the Naga people in India, those are serpent people. Those are the Nagas in India. There's human beings that are Nagas in India. They're born in the Naga tradition. Those are serpent people. They're born from the serpent. So the ancient tradition, we all have reptilian DNA in our brains. Some people more than others, depending on your blood type. This is something I might have explained. I don't know if I've explained it in the podcast or not, but something I've talked about before, which is we have RNA and DNA, which codes our body mainly. RNA is much more ancient. RNA is a reptilian DNA, which is ribonucleic acid versus desoxyribonucleic acid. So one is deoxidized, the other one isn't. What's interesting is RNA is much more primordial. So RNA dates back further than DNA does. DNA is from our hybridized genes as human beings. RNA is from the beings who created us. So those are the serpent people. Those are the Anunnaki, you want to call them the Saurians, the Dracos. Those are all different splices from the reptilian DNA. Phoenix is the ultimate expression of this reality, which also corresponds in density level to the number of quantum physical realms that we have that are stabilized in this current density, which is 216 or 219, depending on if you're thinking of a great phoenix or a smaller phoenix, which would be the three other dimensions from 216 to 219 are timeless, which correspond to the three densities which are at the transcendence of the eightfold path in Buddhism, which has to do with the tenfold or 11-fold path of Arhantas, which would be Samadhi, um, Nirvikalpa Samadhi, and Asamprajnata Samadhi. So Samadhi in Sanskrit would be like, and I'm bad, I'm essentializing again, but because I don't speak Sanskrit. But Samadhi is a state of deep meditation where you attain transcendence, similar to Satori in Japan and Shintoism. So it's a state of meditational transcendence where you arrive to bliss by making faire fi in French. So essentially ignoring the illusion of physical matter in this reality. Like, for example, in Jine meditation in Tibetan Buddhisms of dream, Tibetan Buddhism in the yogas, Tibetan yogas of dream and sleep, which is Jine meditation. There's a book on that. And you meditate on the letter A, the Tibetan letter A, which is the primordial sign, which also is the same as the letter Om, except the letter Om looks like a book with a flame coming out of it on top of the Tibetan letter A.
Hmm.
And this is the meditational principle that you stare at within a rainbow circle. So you stare at the rainbow circle in the letter A and you focus on the letter A, but you see the rainbow circle in the adjacent perimeter until you ignore all the matter around you and then you start seeing the matter as an illusion. Once you get to that level, you get to samadhi. Samadhi is a transcendental state. Now, once you get to samadhi, there's three levels, main levels in Hinduism or in India in Dharma Sanatana of samadhi, which is samadhi is the first one. That's the ultimate level of the eightfold path. What Buddha didn't describe, which the Arahantas describe, which is a predating tradition to Buddhism, Arahantas have to do with the Jain tradition. And what they describe is that there's other states of samadhi, there's other states of meditation, which are even further. It would be like a great transcendental meditation, like a deep samadhi, if you want to put it that way. So you have nirvikalpa samadhi, nir, which means nothing, nirvi, like nerves, but like it's like the negation of the nerves in that sense. Nir means nothing. So nirvikalpa, kalpa is like a great age. It's like a precession of the equinox. So nirvikalpa would be like the great precession of the equinox of pure nothingness. And then samadhi would be the meditation on the great precession of the timeless epoch that we revolve in, of nothingness, of the primordial void or the cosmos, or the great goddess of darkness. Like you could think of meditating on an African goddess and thinking once you meditate on her and your thoughts attain pure stillness, you reach this level of nirvikalpa samadhi. Now, beyond that is asamprajnata samadhi, which is prajna means wisdom. Asamprajnata, which means non-cognitive wisdom. So once you meditate on, people of the rainbow would love this. Like the queer people would love this, because this is the idea that non-binary meditation beyond the divine masculine, which would be samadhi, and the divine feminine, which should be nirvikalpa samadhi, meditating on the primordial African goddess. Then you have nirvikalpa, or asamprajnata, rather, samadhi, which would be the transcendence in a non-binary form of both genders, and realizing that we are neither male nor female, but we appear to be in one form, in our current form, but our souls are genderless.
Wow. Okay, let's end it off there because the podcast is about to finish.
Oh, yeah, that's perfect. That's wonderful. Yo, so we did a whole podcast on this. This is amazing. I'm
Yeah, bro.
glad.
What's up, bro?
Yo,
What's up?
sorry for speaking so much, but I'm glad I was able to express that, because